shut up. I don't care who you are, you don't talk to people like that in here.
Billionaire gets in the car and hears a black waitress telling him to shut up. The reason was, what if a single moment in the back seat of a luxury car could change everything you thought you knew about respect, dignity, and what it truly means to serve others? James Mitchell, 42 and worth more money than most small countries, slid into his black sedan that rainy Thursday evening, exhausted from another day of board meetings and profit margins. He barely noticed the young woman who climbed into the driver's seat, Jasmine, 28, still wearing her diner uniform from the double shift that had just ended. Her name tag read Jazz, and her tired eyes held stories he'd never bothered to hear. As the car pulled away from the curb, James reached for his phone to make yet another business call, but Jasmine's voice cut through the silence with words that stopped him cold. "Sir, I need you to be quiet for just a minute." He looked up, startled, ready to remind her who paid her salary. But something in her tone made him pause. "Where are you watching from tonight?" James had built his empire from nothing, or so he told himself. Mitchell Industries now employed thousands, but success had created walls around his heart thicker than the bulletproof glass in his penthouse office. He'd hired Jasmine through a premium driving service 3 months ago, appreciating her punctuality and silence. She was just another employee, another face in the endless stream of people who made his life run smoothly. He never asked about her life, never wondered why she sometimes looked exhausted or why her hands bore small burns from restaurant work. Jasmine had been supporting her younger brother Kevin through college while caring for their grandmother, Nana Ruth, who'd raised them both after their parents died. The driving job paid better than waitressing, but she still pulled shifts at Murphy's Diner to cover Kevin's textbooks and Nana Ruth's medications. Every morning, she picked up James from his mansion in Beacon Hill, drove him to meetings across the city, and returned him home each evening. 3 months of polite, "Good morning, sir," and "Have a pleasant day, Mr. Mitchell." He never responded with more than a grunt. Tonight felt different. Jasmine's grandmother had spent the day in the emergency room with chest pains, and while the doctors said it was just stress and exhaustion, Jasmine's nerves were frayed thin. Kevin had called during her diner shift to say Nana Ruth was asking for her, but Jasmine couldn't leave work. She needed every dollar, and Mr. Mitchell had requested his usual evening pickup. As James settled into the leather seat and dialed his phone, Jasmine caught sight of him in the rearview mirror. Another call about quarterly projections while her world was crumbling. She'd been invisible to him for months, just hands on a steering wheel, a uniform in his peripheral vision. But tonight, with Nana Ruth's frightened face fresh in her memory and exhaustion weighing down her shoulders, something inside Jasmine snapped. "Sir, I need you to be quiet for just a minute," she said, her voice steady but firm. James looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised in disbelief. No employee had ever spoken to him that way. His first instinct was to fire her immediately, to remind her of the chain of command that kept his world orderly and profitable. But something in her voice, not disrespectful, but desperate, made him hesitate. "Excuse me," he said, his tone cold but curious. Jasmine's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as she navigated through the evening traffic. "I said, please be quiet. Just for a minute. I know you don't think about it, but some of us are holding our breath just trying to keep everything together." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. James had never been spoken to this way by anyone in his employ, yet he found himself lowering his phone. There was something raw and honest in her words that cut through his usual armor of authority. For the first time in 3 months, he really looked at the woman driving his car, noticed the weariness in her shoulders, the way her voice had trembled slightly despite its firmness. The rain drummed against the windshield as they sat in traffic, the silence stretching between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. James found himself studying Jasmine's reflection in the rearview mirror, seeing her for perhaps the first time as an actual person rather than a service provider. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and he noticed the small scar on her left hand from what looked like a burn, probably from restaurant work. "I apologize if I was out of line," Jasmine said quietly, her earlier boldness giving way to the reality of who she was addressing. "It's just been a really hard day, and sometimes the weight of being invisible gets heavy." James felt an unexpected pang in his chest. Invisible. When was the last time he'd really seen the people who made his life possible? The security guards who opened doors, the cleaning staff who worked around his schedule, the assistants who managed every detail of his existence. They'd all become background noise in his pursuit of the next deal, the next acquisition. What happened today? He heard himself asking, surprising them both. Jasmine's eyes met his in the mirror, searching for signs of genuine interest or polite obligation. My grandmother had to go to the hospital. Chest pains. She raised my brother and me after our parents passed, and she's all we have. But I couldn't leave work because we need the money for her medications and my brother's college. The simple honesty of her words hit James harder than any business setback ever had. Here was someone juggling multiple jobs, family responsibilities, and real fear, while he complained about market fluctuations from his leather-appointed office. Is she okay? For now. The doctors think it's stress and exhaustion. She works part-time at a grocery store even though she's 73 because Social Security isn't enough. Jasmine's voice caught slightly. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to not have to choose between being present for family emergencies and paying rent. James had never faced such a choice. Money had insulated him from those impossible decisions for so long that he'd forgotten they existed for others. He thought about his own grandmother, who'd died alone in a hospital while he was closing a deal in Tokyo, too important to come home for her final days. Traffic began moving again, and Jasmine focused on driving, probably regretting her honesty. She needed this job, and speaking truth to power rarely ended well for people in her position. But something had shifted in the car, a crack in the wall that separated their worlds. I had a grandmother too, James said quietly. Ruth was her name, actually. Same as yours. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Jasmine glanced back in surprise. What was she like? Strong. Stubborn. She used to tell me that money was just a tool, and the real measure of a man was what he built with his hands and his heart. James's voice grew soft with memory. I was so busy building my empire that I forgot to visit her before she died. As they pulled into his circular driveway, James made a decision that would change everything. But first, he needed to understand exactly what kind of person had been driving him around for 3 months. The mansion's lights cast long shadows across the manicured lawn as Jasmine parked the sedan. She expected James to exit immediately as he always did, perhaps with a curt reminder about boundaries and professional behavior. Instead, he remained seated, something unrecognizable in his expression. How much do you need? He asked suddenly. Jasmine turned in her seat, confused. Sir. For your grandmother's medications. Your brother's college. How much would it take to stop you from having to choose between family and survival? The question hung in the air like a lifeline she was afraid to grab. In her experience, wealthy people who asked such questions usually had strings attached, expectations that came with their generosity. I don't understand. I'm asking because I just realized something terrible about myself, James said, his voice heavy with a shame he'd never allowed himself to feel. For 3 months, you've been more than punctual, more than professional. You've been kind. When I was short-tempered, you never responded in kind. When I ignored you completely, you still said good morning. And I never even learned your real name. Jasmine's throat tightened. It's Jasmine. Jazz is just what they called me at the diner.
How much help do you need?
Jasmine. He repeated her name like he was tasting something new. I want to help, but I need you to trust me enough to be honest. How much would change your life? The vulnerability of the moment terrified her. She thought about Nana Ruth's tired face, about Kevin's textbooks bought secondhand and already falling apart, about the stack of medical bills growing on their kitchen table. $50,000 would pay off Nana's medical debt and get Kevin through his last year of college. But Mr. Mitchell, I can't accept charity. I work for what I have. It wouldn't be charity, James said, stepping out of the car and walking around to her window. It would be an apology. And a lesson I should have learned 40 years ago. Jasmine rolled down the window, studying his face in the amber light of the street lamps. What kind of lesson? That respect isn't something you earn by having money. It's something you give because everyone deserves dignity, regardless of how they serve you. James pulled out his checkbook, something he rarely used in an age of digital transactions. My grandmother Ruth used to say that we're all walking each other home. I forgot that somewhere along the way. As he wrote out the check, Jasmine felt tears threatening to spill. Mr. Mitchell, I can't. This is too much. James, he said, handing her the check. My name is James. And this isn't too much, it's not enough. Not for 3 months of treating you like furniture. Not for the reminder that money without humanity is just expensive emptiness. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Jasmine stared at the check, then back at his face. Why now? What changed? You did. When you told me to be quiet, you reminded me that everyone has a story worth hearing. Everyone has a grandmother they're trying to protect, dreams they're fighting for. James's voice broke slightly. I just wish I'd learned to listen sooner. But the night wasn't over. As Jasmine sat there processing this unexpected turn, her phone rang. It was Kevin, and his voice was panicked. Jazz, you need to get to the hospital now. Kevin's voice was tight with fear. Nana Ruth collapsed again. They're saying it's serious this time. Jasmine's hands shook as she held the phone. The check James had given her fluttered to the car floor, forgotten in the face of a real crisis. I'm on my way, she whispered, her professional composure cracking completely. James heard enough of the conversation to understand. Without hesitation, he opened the passenger door and got in. Drive. I'll direct you to Mass General. It's faster than the GPS. Mr. Mitchell, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm insisting. His voice carried an authority different from his usual business tone. This was personal command born from genuine care. And it's James. Your grandmother needs you, and you shouldn't face this alone. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of rain and brake lights. James used his connections to call ahead, ensuring the best cardiac team would be ready. Jasmine drove with the fierce concentration of someone for whom every second mattered, while James made calls that opened doors she never could have accessed. At the hospital, James's name carried weight that turned bureaucratic walls into bridges. They were ushered directly to the cardiac wing, where Dr. Patricia Santos, the city's best cardiologist, was already reviewing Nana Ruth's case. Mrs. Washington is stable, Dr. Santos explained, but she needs a valve replacement. It's a serious surgery, and at her age, recovery will be challenging. The good news is that with proper care and rest afterward, she should have many good years ahead. Kevin, barely 19 and trying to be strong, finally broke down. Jasmine wrapped her arms around her brother as the reality hit them. The surgery would cost more than they could imagine, and even with insurance, the rehabilitation would require months of care they couldn't afford. James had been standing quietly nearby, but now he stepped forward. Doctor, what would it cost for the absolute best care? Private room, extended rehabilitation, everything she needs. Dr. Santos looked puzzled by the stranger's involvement, but answered professionally. For comprehensive care, including the surgery, recovery, and 6 months of rehabilitation, we're looking at approximately $200,000. The number hit Kevin and Jasmine like a physical blow, but James simply nodded. Done. Bill it to the Mitchell Foundation. I want your best team on this case. Jasmine turned to him, tears streaming down her face. James, I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do this because 3 hours ago, you taught me what real wealth looks like. He handed her his business card with his personal number written on the back. Real wealth is having someone who loves you enough to work 3 jobs just to keep you safe. You and Kevin are richer than I ever knew how to be. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As the medical team prepared for surgery, James realized this was just the beginning of a transformation that would reshape not just Jasmine's life, but his own understanding of what it meant to truly serve others. 6 months later, James sat in Nana Ruth's living room, sharing Sunday dinner with the Washington family, something that had become a weekly tradition. The house was small but filled with warmth that his mansion had never possessed. Nana Ruth, recovered and vibrant again, was telling stories about raising Jasmine and Kevin, her eyes bright with the joy of someone who'd been given a second chance. Kevin had graduated from college with honors and landed his dream job as a software engineer, thanks in part to recommendations from James's business network. But more importantly, he'd never had to worry about choosing between his studies and his family's welfare. Jasmine had left the driving service to pursue her real passion, opening a community center that provided job training and support for families like hers. You know, Nana Ruth said, refilling James's plate with her famous cornbread, when Jasmine first told me about that night in the car, I told her that sometimes angels come in expensive suits. James laughed, the sound genuine and warm. I think you have that backwards, Mrs. Washington. I'm the one who met angels that night. The transformation hadn't been simple or immediate. James had struggled to understand a world where kindness wasn't transactional, where people's worth wasn't measured by their bank accounts. But the Washington family had been patient teachers, showing him that real success was measured in the lives you touched, not the profits you accumulated. He'd restructured his business practices too, implementing fair wages and healthcare benefits that actually supported families. The Mitchell Foundation is now focused on education and healthcare access, but James's favorite part was the scholarship program named after Nana Ruth Washington, helping kids like Kevin pursue dreams that poverty had once made impossible. I need to tell you something, James said as dinner wound down. That night when you told me to be quiet, you saved my life, too. I was so lost in building my empire that I'd forgotten how to build relationships. I was rich but completely broke. Jasmine smiled, remembering that rainy evening that had changed everything. You know what I learned. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak truth with love, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. And I learned that listening, really listening, to someone's story can change your own story completely, James replied. As he prepared to leave that evening, Nana Ruth pulled him aside. James, honey, you've given us so much more than money. You've given us respect, dignity, and most importantly, you've shown my grandchildren that kindness can come from anywhere. But the greatest gift, you let us give something back to you, too. Walking to his car, which he now drove himself most days, James reflected on how a single moment of honest confrontation had dismantled years of emotional walls. The mansion still stood on Beacon Hill, but his real home had become wherever the people he loved gathered around a table. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey that reminds us all that true wealth isn't what we accumulate, but what we give away and the connections we choose to build. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the simplest act of courage, being willing to truly see each other.